Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Harit Prem Bharat Mahotsav, an initiative by Prem Jain Memorial Trust on day 3. And we have with us Ms. Payal Jain, the founder of Prem Jain Memorial Trust. And I would like to not only welcome her, but also request her to address the attendees and tell us the significance of this Mahotsav, which has been held on annual basis now. Payalji.
Thank you very much, Vivekji. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Big thank you from Prem Jain Memorial Trust. This is our third edition of the Harit Prem Bharat Mahotsav. We started this tradition in 2019, and in 2021, it's our third edition. The first year we had, the idea was to have events around sustainability to increase awareness about sustainability amongst the younger generation, among students, amongst working professionals. The trust was formed in the memory of Dr. Jain, who was also known as the father of the green building movement in India. When he started thinking about green buildings way back, almost 15 years ago, I remember hearing all about Indian Green Building Council, and then he took over as chairman. And we started with something like 20,000 square feet. Today, you'll be very happy to know we're at 7.75 billion square feet in India. And I'm told next year it will hit 10 billion mark. So India is number 2 in the world as far as green building space is concerned. We have some very eminent architects with us, and I'm sure they've seen this whole journey and this movement of how we have gone from glass and steel to now going back to our roots. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about Charanjit and Nilanja are going to speak and inspire our students. But to come back to the Mahotsav, the idea behind the Mahotsav was to create awareness and to have 1 week of celebrating the planet Earth. I think when we started this exercise, we didn't realize how important it will become post-COVID. I think the importance of it has become many-fold. And as you all know, we only have one planet. If we continue to abuse it, it is going to thrust us off it. And we have nowhere else to go. We don't have another planet to go to. So it is very important to look after our environment. And I don't believe sustainability is limited to buildings. I think it spreads into design, it spreads into things that you do every day. So, whether you recycle your everyday, things that you buy, that you use, you should try and recycle everything. So it's more of a commitment and a passion on a daily basis, and not just something we talk about on forums like this. And I'm hoping some of you will take away this thought and then, get 10, 20, 100 more people to talk about the same thing. That's the only way this movement will grow. I'll leave it at that. I'm very, very grateful to be here. Thank you, Vivekji, for making this happen. Thank you for being here, to our eminent speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Payalji. While we are waiting for other attendees to join, let me just tell you that I am Professor Vivek Sabrawal. I'm the moderator for this panel session for today. And we have 2 eminent panelists, Professor Charanjit Singh Shah and architect Nilanja Boban. Both don't need any introduction to the architecture fraternity and to the students. They've been deeply involved with the architecture education on many fronts. And they've been pioneers in the profession, have done some landmark buildings, but their contribution to green architecture, if I may say so, has been tremendous. And that's the reason why we have invited them today and wanted to have a panel discussion. So before we actually start with the panel discussion, let me give you a brief introduction about Professor Charanjit Singh Shah. Well, when you have to briefly describe the kind of work he's done, with nearly 50 years practice, so I have to really cut down on some of the resume, and I'll request him to pardon me for that. He is not only an architect, planner, and infrastructure expert with so many years of industry experience behind him, but he's also been an educationist, a teacher, an art and architecture critic, and he's an author of many books in architecture, and he's recently authored Redefining Indian Sustainable Smart Cities. And some of the landmark buildings he's done is spread all across India, and of course he's done projects outside India as well, and referred as the Airport King. Even though he's done some major projects, whether it is Ahmedabad Gandhi Metro, Lucknow Railway, Kota Railway, master plan for city of Jamshedpur, and the most recently the iconic terminal building for Kartarpur Corridor project, which was inaugurated by our Prime Minister and was completed in record time. And see, he's also been a prolific writer, and his contribution in journals, newspapers has been tremendous and has won several awards. He also initiated the Smart Habitat Foundation, and whose role was to promote art and architecture and knowledge among practitioners. So he comes with a wealth of knowledge and very passionate about green architecture, and we'll get to hear more about him. Second panelist for the day is architect Nilanja Boban, and his contribution is no less in the field of medium. And he was a gold medalist in architecture from Institute of Environment Design in Gujarat. And he did a master's and post-graduation in energy efficient architecture from Istanbul Technical University in Turkey. He has substantially contributed in establishing the green building movement in India, receiving the IGBC Platinum Award for North India's first green home in 2014, and has been awarded Terry's SP Greha for the first five-star green home in India. He has received over 41 national awards for architecture, design, and conservation, including awards from IIA, HUTCO, NDTV, IIID, and CWAB. Has more than 200 national and international publications to his credit, and has authored many articles in national and international professional journals, and has made his presentations not only in India but even in US and Europe. So we are heading for a great session today, believe me. And so what I'm going to do is, without further delay, I'm going to start the session by having a round of questions. I'll throw some questions to our panelists. And while we do that, the attendees are also encouraged to ask questions as we go along. You can put it on the Q&A or the chat, and we'll take up a few questions towards the end. So let me first start with Professor Chandra Singh Shah ji. My first question to you would be, would you agree that in the 21st century, architects have shown greater respect for the environment and the ecology and have embraced green architecture like never before? Please support your answer with examples.
First of all, thank you, Vivek ji and Payal ji, for making this such a lovely platform for at least a subject which is so talked about. And let's see that we really go into the depth of all these things put together. And thank you, Nilanjan, to be sharing such a lovely platform with you. A man who is not passion, but his DNA is also sustainability. So that is what I say. So
thank you, sir.
But looking upon this subject, and as you said, 21st century, probably I would take it like from the last 2000 years of the human settlement, particularly in this subcontinent, has been very interesting and have been very, very sustainable in all respects, because whatever development has taken place, it has actually been into sustainability in a very, very sensitive manner. And probably what I look upon, when let's only talk about and starting from the post-independent era, where we can practically connect ourselves as well. And after 47, there was so much of, demand of architecture to develop. So, and I am really very fascinating to see that what was done by in the last, from 47, 50s to 80s, up to 80s, it has been a fantastically, understandable architecture, which was, fundamentally very strong. And when I really see over the great masters from Le Corbusier coming to India, and then to Joseph Stein, to Doshi, Korea, Rajrawal, Kuldeep Singh, design group, Ranjit Sabiki and Jawala, Mr. Chatterjee and Gulzar Singh and Mr. Rai and Gulzar Singh. Those were the time when I really see great buildings which perhaps speak of sustainability, may not be that they are labeled as LEED or GREA, but if you really look upon, like India International Center or India Habitat Center or Shivnath Prashad's contribution or any of these buildings, they actually speak of an architecture which is responsive to the environment, for the people and for the place, and which is practically speaking about the environment and respecting the resources and the sun movement. So perhaps when I see all these buildings, everything what has been designed is based on some philosophy. Sometimes I see a building which is very, very interestingly developed through the engineering architecture. And somewhere I see some buildings which are from the service, from like what we generally call as the MEP, and there is a cohesiveness between the various parameters where we see that yes, it is a process which actually emerged through various things put together, and they are garlanded into a sustainable architecture. So unless and until we understand that I generally say a built mass should not be treated as a mass of brick and concrete, but as a living organism which breathes and which is embodied with nature. And once I see that anything, any building which is there, it breathes. So I have to put soul into it. Once I put soul into it, the organism will grow, and the organic architecture will definitely demand for something where my friend Nilanja, as you're sitting there in Kerala, and how you are tempted and fascinated to use the local materials. That's so important. Once I understand the application of local materials along with the local technology, and that becomes participation of local people, craftsmen put together, and which makes holistic, which puts soul into architecture, that creates a belongingness. And then I always say that it is Indian sustainable, smart development. Perhaps today is the time, and particularly after COVID, let's see that we do not be empowered by the global intervention and empowerment, but look upon many more things put together, which we are enriched in India from the great heritage and the ethnic architecture. That's a call for today. And I am very fortunate that, I do not know, I have companies of people like Vivek, Sabro, and Nilanja, and all those people put together who adore sustainability. So that is the call. And definitely to the students, I would say that let them really go into deep rooted architecture, which is sustainable and not a cosmetic architecture. And perhaps my friend Anil Lal used to say, today's cosmetic green, LEED accredited or any other accredited architecture is like red is green. Let's create green as green and do not put cosmetism onto the architecture and start calling red as green. So these are fundamentally, I think that after 1980s, 85, we were so much empowered with the glass towers and other architecture, which has really mushroomed the complete country and complete subcontinent. So today is the conscious time that where I think I have modified myself, I've reformed myself, I've transformed myself into creating architecture which is belonging to the people, to the place, and that is what I call as sustainable architecture. Over to you, Vivek ji, and to Nilanjan.
Yeah,
Yeah, Vivek,
thank
can I
you so
just
much. Yeah,
add
please. Yes,
in
please.
just a minute to something which is very nicely put by Professor Shah, that, bringing in the soul to the building. And like you pointed out, in the 21st century, people are more and more aware of it. And as Professor Shah rightly said, in India, we've always had this tradition. We've always had this sustainable practices for centuries. It is now that people have risen to it because of, in fact, even the most recent pandemic taught us so many things. If you remember, during the first initial months of the lockdown, when people stopped the use of cars, vehicles, we could see the birds coming back, the greenery coming back, the environment getting cleaner. So that was a lesson, I think, that if we start living green, we will have a better place to inherit. And now the UN has recognized that. The UN has started this charter, the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Agenda 2030, which has been signed by all the countries. It addresses sustainability as a major part of their agenda. It would be interesting if the participants are interested, please Google for Agenda 2030 and you come to this SDG, which is called the Sustainable Development Goal. It addresses all impact on the environment. It is about world peace. It is about by creating a sustainable green world by 2030. And that's an agenda which is endorsed by each and every country who are part of the UN. I just wanted to add that. Thank
Yeah,
you.
great. Thank you. Now, going further to what Professor Shah just said, maybe this question is again addressed to him. So whenever we undertake major changes in buildings and its surroundings, we need to see its implications in the context of the present and the future. Should we be supporting a system and allowing something to be built that we know is destroying the real potential for quality of living that most Indians hope for? There is a presiding belief that widening roads by destroying mature trees or building flyovers near existing buildings will make our open spaces pristine. Your comments, please, Professor Shah.
No, I practically see this from the other side of the coin, what you said. What is happening is that today, in the name of development, we starting putting layers into the city. It's like one flyover to another flyover to another one rail to rapid rail to rapid metro, and then multiple layering the city. And eventually, what is happening is these are becoming like big concrete jungles. The whole thing is what we need to see that, and particularly in Nilanjan ji, after COVID, I think we have all understood that we need to do minimalistic architecture. Let's see that how, in the name of capacity building, in the name of capacity of the cities, we are practically overlayering and overcrowding the building with more buildings and structures. And then eventually what that happens is that I'm trying to overshadow the city. It's like air pollution, water pollution, sound pollution, and it's become a mechanical, And today we need to see, I'm not saying that I need to be nomadic, but I'm saying that let's not be robotic. So we are all becoming robotic, and we say, okay, let's make large spaces everywhere. And I think the dimensions need to be analyzed. We need to see how we create the best of minimalistic capacity building in the spaces. overlapping various spaces with the time management, with system management, with methodology of working. And that is what the technology should be helping us to create the larger spaces within no space. So that is what, today cities need to dig out spaces to create more open spaces with no open spaces left out in the city. How do you create that? So that is what is, let's see that we create that human scale, the human values, the human settlement, wherein the last mile connectivity in the city and the various intermodality needs to be addressed in a manner that it should not look like a concrete jungle. So to my experience, now lately about the last 15, 20, 25 years, particularly in infrastructure, I would always say that let us see that the cities to be, the epicenters need to be shifted. And if I start putting load onto the same epicenters, it becomes more overcrowded. So it's like a shift from one epicenter to another epicenter, create more satellite volumes of spaces, self-generated, where that is sort of a sustainable architecture. There is always a limit to, pressures in the city. Now, what is happening is, now that is, I think Nilanja will agree with me that, all these colonies, what we have done is, first we had only, and the ground coverage was limited to 50%, 55%. Then we said, okay, only 2.5 floors was allowed. Then, land value is increasing. We make it 4 floors, still 4 floors. It's now vertical cities within small residential colonies. And the feel and touch of the ground, the feel and touch of the soil, is missing in my life. I am becoming artificial. My interiors are artificial based landscaping. All my inner spaces are centrally fully air conditioned. I do not get the fresh air. So it's now the mindset which calls for sustainable natural living. It's perhaps, as has been said very nicely by Payalji, that the sustainability cannot be limited to only buildings. Roti, kapda, makan. All these things are important. What I wear, what the shelter is, and what I eat. This gives me like a way of life. The whole system needs to be sustainable. I cannot be cosmetically living in a hut and in a cottage with a mud house, but again, try to do, all those things which are not in a sustainable manner in the living way. So perhaps that is the intake. I need to see the oscillation of the sun, which really practically cools me and warms me, and not that all the times I am with the mechanical system. Even I get a wake up call from my mobile because I do not have the system of my wake up and sleeping time. The management of my mental status is actually not coming with my natural living. So once I start living in nature, in a natural manner, in the natural way of life, the system will automatically come into sustainability. And now what we are doing, perhaps to me, is very harsh, that we need to see that we do something from our heart, talk to our soul, and see how I should really reflect upon. But what we are actually, our needs are very less, but our greeds have increased so much that, if somebody comes to my house, I must say, he lives in a palatial house. But still, I do not go to many rooms for years together, even to visit that place and sit there. So that is what is required. Let's create the minimalistic architecture, which has the maximizing of the facilities and also overlapping various things put together with the understanding of technology. That is what the tool should be.
Very well said, sir. My next question is to Nilanja.
Yes.
We know that great buildings do not just happen. They require exceptional vision, good programming, order, clarity, and harmony to arrive at a solution that is both practical and beautiful. What are the attributes to a great building in today's context in terms of embracing green architecture to you?
So it all starts with the intent and the why. Whenever we start any good work or practices, when we create as an architect our own philosophy, we have to know why we are doing it. I was always attached to the environment. I grew up in the greens. Uh, we could smell the rain during those days. We would sleep out under the sky. We would climb trees, and those I think experiences mattered a lot. And for me, architecture always had to be something which responded to all the five senses of the human being. So I feel the same is for a green building. When we design green, we have to start with basically a sustainable lifestyle, because it starts at home. How you are going to live, how you are going to build, and eventually use those spaces. So every building that we design needs to respect the environment, needs to look at the local ecology, the climate, the technology, the local traditions, materials. And it is only a myth that a green home or a green building or a very sustainable building will look poor. And I think that is not true. You can make a totally green building. We've made mud houses which are very beautiful. So a green building vision has to start with that. And if you may allow, I happen to be in Kerala right now. And I'm right now staying in one of the projects that we have designed. And let me try, if I don't lose the network, I would like to, for the participants, it might be interesting if I take you around. This is a project. As I step out, you will see that we brought in columns which were taken out from old buildings, these nicely, intricately carved columns. And the house need not be boring or mundane. It can be made to look very contemporary, yet it can be totally, totally green. As we step out, you can see these columns around the veranda where people sit out, and you have a grand view of the sea, because you should be able to hear the ocean waves, because architecture has to respond to all the five senses, as I said. And as I take you towards the house, all the materials are local. Every material was locally sourced. The house is nothing but a simple habitat in nature. We just placed this habitat in nature using local artisans. Every person, every part of the house has that Kerala feel to it. How the landscape also comes in, how we can smell different flowers, how we can feel the different textures, because the tactile sense is also very important. How we detail in architecture. For example, you see this, the smooth carved pillars, the smoothness of the wood, it contrasts with the rough laterite blocks of the plinth, or the rough pathway which is here, against the soft grass, against the smoothness of the wood, the smoothness of the tile. The courtyards are very much a part of the house, as we see the owners enjoying out in this courtyard, which leads back to the interior of the house. So any good building, any good architecture has to, I'm just taking people to the walkthrough, and every house, in fact, the kitchen also overlooks greenery, and it overlooks at the back through the window in towards the backwaters. And every room has a majestic view. I will quickly take you to one of the bedrooms here. Here, sitting on this bed, the first sunrise or the evening sunset, you are able to look out through the door into the ocean through this veranda, using every element of local Kerala architecture. The sitting bench, the char bench, all that has been put into this. So architecture, as Professor Shah says, has to be soulful, and it makes it very rich when we bring in the local traditions, the local craftsmanship, and putting it together in creating spaces. I think that should answer you. It was a very impromptu thought in my mind, so I thought, let me try it without losing network. I hope
No,
we
I
will.
think this is great. What you have shown, and thanks to technology, that we all joined you in Kerala in this house in the wonderful surroundings. It's great that you shared, and I think it's sort of a blessing in disguise that you happen to be in Kerala
Yeah.
and you were able to share this. It's so wonderful. My next question to you, Nilanjan, is that it's been noticed for the past few years that we are gaining momentum on green building development. And green buildings have a lot of technology built into it in terms of environment friendly and energy saving concepts. There is still a wide gap between what is being designed and how it is operated. Now, the US Green Building Council that administers the LEEDs program found out that more than half of the LEED certified buildings actually consumed more energy per square foot than at least 70% of comparable buildings. Why have our premier organizations not initiated a green program for architects where green is seen holistically and buildings not judged by only carbon ratings?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, Vivek. What has happened is in India, we converted the US lead system, which was the leadership in energy efficiency and design. This came up in the turn of the century, and Dr. Jain was the foremost exponent of that. He customized it and made it applicable to the Indian scenario, customized it really. But at the same time, the US lead system, as you said, a lot of buildings may not be that much really green. They might be certified green. It depends on the architects and the designers of how much we can sensitize the owners to make it green. The lead system, for example, the US lead system says that you can do any amount of air conditioning as long as you put 10% of that off the grid. You generate that power in solar and we will consider it green. Now, for example, the first platinum green building that we did under Dr. Jain, Spectral was the consultants, in fact, Payal, and Dr. Jain was guiding us through that because it was the first building in North India to get a platinum rating. The clients who were from Dubai was making a house in Gurgaon. He wanted to achieve 18 degrees in air conditioning. We said it's not possible. He said, no, the remote says 18 degrees, so you should design for 18 degrees. So we had a tough time to convince him that you don't need that level of cooling because then it's not efficient. You might get a green tag because we are using a 5-star rated air conditioning system. So a compromise was that we brought it down to 22 degrees. The average, the comfort level we know is 27 degrees by ASHRAE. So we had to really put down the client. He wanted all the toilets, all the dressing rooms to be air conditioned, which is not required. So we designed walk-in closets attached to toilets so that it could get in some air from the bedroom. So these are the things that we really need to do to make a building actually green and not really go for a certification. For example, one very interesting project we did in Jim Corbett. I remember this was before these rating systems came up, and this is in the middle of the jungle, and we decided to build with whatever we got from the site, and it's made of thatch, grass, bamboo, wood, and stone and mud, and using local artisans. It has no rating. And when we finished our first building with Dr. Jain, I was once talking to him and I wanted to present this Jim Corbett, it's called Camp Folktale Creek, to Dr. Jain. And this is very interesting. I gave all the presentation about this green project, which was made of mud, thatch, solar, no electricity there, uh, tiles, stone, bamboo, everything locally made by artisans. And I said, sir, is there a possibility that I can get a certification? He said, Nilanjan, it will be a disrespect to this building if you go in for a certification. I don't need to certify it. It is green. We can see it, it's green. So sometimes, I mean, that was a beautiful piece of advice because we wanted always some kind of an acclaim. We had 2-3 buildings which had a certification. I said, why not this? Post construction, at that time, IGBC, Terry had not started. Later on, we did the first building of Terry, which was a 5-star, but that time there was no certification for an existing building. So he said, no, don't go for it. So that is exactly reinforcing what you said, that sometimes we go in for a carbon reducing of carbon footprint by the book, but eventually we may not achieve a green building. For example, when we use solar systems, now certain times people want a solar system where we use the solar geysers. Through the solar energy we are heating the water for the house. Now what happens is, people, if they want warm water all the time, we have to have an auxiliary tank and a second electrical pump, so that if the water does not heat due to the lack of sun rays, then the electrical coil kicks up, and there is a motor which keeps circulating the warm water in the pipe, so that throughout the day, 24 hours, you are getting warm water. But then that is highly energy efficient. Then the pumps are working, you are consuming a lot of energy and electricity. So sometimes you may be using the solar to produce warm water, but if you are using a pump all the time to keep that water circulating in your pipeline, that's not energy efficient. So this is what I would like to highlight. We have to come to a sustainable lifestyle first. We have to live green, and then our buildings will be responding to that.
And I think this is a very pertinent point that you've made, and I think the students and the young professionals will, something that they need to keep a note on. It's not the lead rating that they should be going after, but look at the holistic approach. Now that brings me to back to Professor Shah, that moving from micro to macro level, what according to you is a healthy city? What would you call a healthy city to be like?
Before I really take what is healthy city, but I think what more needs to is what is a healthy home. So we need to understand. I'll just take something from Nilanja in terms of creating buildings which are green and which are accredited green. One is the active way, which we been listening, that how the air conditioning, other things are done. But can we see that we design physical buildings as green buildings first? The parameters of an architect planner is, once you practically design a building in a passive manner, which is green, then you support it with the active ways to make it further greenest, So let's see that first of all, the psyche of the architect has to create a physical planning in terms of the orientation, in terms of the placement of the building, in terms, so that you see that in terms of the oscillation of the sun, movement, then we talk about various other elements. And then as Nilanja has already said, the various things which have been tested through many centuries, like courtyards, mutual shadings, screening, layering, it's like overlaying the building. How do you see that we layer the buildings in terms so that, I generally make a statement that you need to see that when you plan the integrated approach towards landscaping, positive and negative spaces are to be interwoven. Landscaping doesn't mean that you just put some trees here and there in the negative space, ghas laga diya, or I say, oh, landscaping done. So understanding of the wind direction, putting the type of trees which are required to be put, so that the hot air which goes through those barriers get comfortably cooled up by the time it reaches my build form. So it's like I layer through the landscape, through my various other elements which are MEP, and then I see my structure, then I see various other elements of architecture, and then by way of the physical planning and traveling through my wind, and I know that if the wind here at 12 o'clock, the velocity and the temperature. So I say, oh, this wind is now at 40 degrees. And how do I see with my physical planning and various barriers, this 40 becomes by the time it reaches my window, it is already 30, 28, and 26 I require, as Nilanja ji has said. So can I do that? Then I see that how I create these layers. Maybe I put some silver oak somewhere to cut. Then I put some shady trees. Then I say, oh, let me create a water body, so that the wind goes through the water body. And all this, is coming and traveling. And by the way, when I reach my window, it's already 28. So another 2 degrees, I need not do by any air conditioning. I can do with some other alternative ways of air cooling system, which is not, like a lot of humidity is there. I control all those things put together and I create that sustainable architecture. Air conditioning should be as a last resort, so that it's a ventilator. I call it air conditioning is like a ventilator when I am in the ICU. Can I really breathe in a natural manner, live in a natural manner, create that ambience where I do not need the air conditioning system at all? This is what, I sorry to say that, it is like Ishre or anything. This is again global empowerment. And these guys sitting along with us, with all these air conditioning companies, they start, oh, I have proved this is green, this is a greenest, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-star system. Where you put this, you will get this. But the type of air syndrome which I get in my air conditioning system, where I am sitting in an absolutely closed room with my glass fixed and no ventilation. Sadly, today, my outside my air is also polluted here in Delhi. But in case I create the natural pollution-free air outside, bring it inside and do all this. This is what we have experimented at, one of the Nilanjan, that Times Square Mall in near Raipur, where all these elements we have just tried to put. Similarly, in various other buildings like Terry, Gol Pahadi, we did the staff housing, where again all these sustainable things were, experimented. Many more other office buildings like HPHGSL building in Panchkula, Oil India in Jodhpur, CRI Pump in Coimbatore, Sugna Poultry. All these corporate buildings are practically LEED accredited and all mutual shading. How do you see? Now, when I see Lee Corbusier work, in Chandigarh, you see, there are steps, volumes, and then cut the sun. How do you cut the west sun? How do you see that you stop the south sun penetrating into a building? So that is what is required. So when I see my building designed in a manner which practically oscillate, which is stimulated, and I really calculate the energy consumption into the building, and I see the window and ratio, where I have to keep the window. Definitely, I agree. I need to see the view. Inside space has to come outside and everything. But probably where Nilanjan would like to support it, that if I keep a large window, but you have a large veranda on top of that window, so that the glared sun do not touch your glass and you are comfortable while you are inside the room. Not that I make my window which is totally exposed and the west hard sun practically touches my glass and it becomes so much heat, then somebody will come and tell me, put a double insulating glass, and that is what is to be avoided. In case I am able to design a building, taking into nitty-gritties of things, where I need a veranda, how do I put that? So that probably my take on this. And now you said about the cities. Cities, I think our cities for the last, about 100 years back were more sustainable than today. All the cities, Jaipur, Rajasthan has no water, but there are plenty of waters, because there are plenty of lakes, bowlies, step wells. The concept of bowlies, step well, lakes, and all this thing is from the place where there is no water. They conserve the rainwater. We are putting all that rainwater into my sewerage, and then it goes to the Yamuna, and the Yamuna becomes a sewerage Yamuna. So that is what is there. And if consciously, even we today wake up call, and today we said, okay, let's see that we generate all our lakes in Delhi and we are, water rich. So that is what is required in our cities to make them sustainable. And today's modern world, I say, is like net zero energy, net zero water, net zero solid waste management. And sadly, we are unable to do on water and solid waste. And we see the big chunk of mounds coming for the solid waste, and we are not able to control the solid waste. So perhaps that is the intake. Let's see, we look beyond net zero and create that sort of an architecture which is I need not bring anything from outside. मेरा झगड़ा खत्म हो जाएगा interstate. In case I am able to create that city here, whether there's Satluj, this water, that water. No, rain is there everywhere. Just conserve rainwater. And I think the human species is absolutely comfortable. So that's my intake.
Great, great. Thank you. Nilanja, this is often asked both by students and professionals. They're very curious to know that do green buildings cost more than traditional buildings? And if so, why? And how easy is it then for a growing economy like India to sustain the same?
Well, Vivek, let me tell you frankly, if you design something very consciously, then you can do without any additional expenditure. And like Professor Shah just mentioned, that you first design a window in the wrong way and then you want to put in a double glazing, obviously that is going to be expensive. The problem comes when people are designing commercial buildings where you are not often able to provide a shade, where you go in for these systems. You may want to go in for a double glazing. You may want to go for 5-star rated appliances, but even normal air conditioning is not required. If you can bring in fresh air into the building at 27 degrees, and that can be achieved by proper insulation and orientation and landscaping, and with minimal openings on the west side, you can create an architecture which can do without any mechanical forms of heating, ventilation. Having said that, yes, if you want to put in all the green measures, especially if you want to go in for certification, there are certain certifications which say that all the appliances must be a 5-star rated appliance. Now, 5-star rated air conditioners, refrigerators do cost about 10 to 15% more. One has to go in for sensor lighting, movement sensors, areas which are not occupied, like lobbies, lounges, staircases. There, the light will switch on only if it senses a movement. Photo sensors are there where lights switch on in the evening, outdoor lights, parkings, garages, and it switches off early hours in the morning. So those systems, when you put into a building, they cost about 5 to maximum 10% more. But then earlier it was more expensive. These days, all the systems have become much cheaper. You may want to go in for a certain level of automation to save on water, to kind of monitor your water usage and all that, or low flow fixtures in the toilets. They're slightly more expensive. But I would still say it should not, if you properly design it, take care of the air conditioning, take care of the energy consumption of the building, and how much of resources you are using in terms of the building materials. You can use a lot of recycled wood, a lot of recycled, like I showed you, all the wood here is recycled, all the pillars, everything. We've used all the old systems like a deep veranda, which shades all the windows, so it does not get direct sun. So if you put in all the measures together, the building cost can go up by 5% maximum. But I think that you recover within 2 to 3 years in terms of your saving from energy, water, and all other resources. If you're using only Indian materials, if you're only using local materials, you save on transport, you save on labor if you're using local labor. So there is a considerable amount of saving which you offset from a little bit of 5% extra that you might spend for if you want to spend for 5-star rated appliances or certain double glazing, and it pays back to you. And after that, your building can run totally free of cost. That's the most.
Nilanja, one of the attendees has just asked a question. How can I determine if a material is green or not?
Okay. So this is how we decide. You have to see the source of production of that material, whether it's from a close distance or if it's coming from far, whether that material is something that is replenishable or not. There are certain materials which are non-replenishable. There are sometimes we use the topsoil to make bricks, for example, that spoils the earth. That is not recommended. Then you have to see what is the overall life cycle of that product. Some building materials last only a short span of time. Some buildings last a longer period of time. You see most of our natural materials which we have used in our historic buildings, like stone with a simple lime mortar, or even wood. All the traditional buildings in Kashmir, in down south, they have sustained over centuries. So that becomes more viable if you see the overall life cycle of the product. And you should be also using materials which the local artisans and the local technology is available to make use of it in the building. If we use a material for which you need to get skilled labor from a far off distance, or if we use a certain material which has a lot of what we call embodied energy, a lot of energy is spent in its production. So any natural material that is available locally is absolutely green. The moment it goes through a production process, or it has to be transported through a long distance and you need skilled labor to use it, then it is not green. This is the
I'll just add in this, Vivek ji. It's a very, very interesting thing. And what is sustainability? Can I put a question to me myself only, that what is sustainability to eat? Food. Which is the food which is sustainable? If I understand that, if suppose every day I start eating, the butter, chicken, and, or some other thing around, what will be my lifestyle? Similarly, when I talk about, it's like cosmetic development in any of the building would definitely cost higher. But if I start to look organic, live organic, and I start to see that what I eat is organic and seasonal food, it's like local food. So I think perhaps the student would be trying to understand, in case I make a building and I need to see that I use the local available material, then, the material science is very important. The feel, touch, smell of the material, of the soil. You see, every material is practically made from the soil. So in case I understand the feel and touch, taste, then the byproducts will be absolutely recyclable, not sustainable. So they become robotic. This body is sustainable. I for a purpose for 50 years or for शरीर उस for building we need to see which cyclic
So can I ask you the last question of the session, since we have barely 5 minutes left with us? I know there are so many other questions that people have been asking, but I think let it be the last question. That how should we initiate the green program in a more structured manner in the curriculum of architecture institutes? I know it's been taught at, as an elective subject, as a subject here or there. How can it be taught in a more structured manner? First to Professor Shah, just very briefly, if you could.
Can you say it again, because
Yeah.
I got
Okay.
disconnected.
So the last question of the day is that how should we initiate the green program in a more structured manner in the curriculum of architecture institutions?
So understanding sustainability is to understand the materials, the constituents. It's like, I would say, if you want to become a good chef, you need to understand the recipe. The process of recipe is to understand the various constituents. And once I'm able to understand the various constituents put together, the intensity of all the constituents needs to be understood to create the best of the dish. So similarly, an architect, perhaps some of the subjects which are neglected, which are elements of applied architecture, are very, very important. You need not take other subject other than the design. Maybe it is construction, or it is climatology, or it is structure, it is building construction, it is illumination, lighting, all put together, plumbing, sanitation, the soil condition, the climatology, the specification. See, it's like understanding everything and making yourself into a progressive architect of understanding where the holistic architecture will develop. Perhaps the education is only limited to making a build form and we into the aesthetics. The functionality is practically lost. So sometimes it is said that what comes first, functionality comes first, or the form comes first. The form needs to complement the functionality, and functionality needs to supplement through the greater form, so that we create that sort of a holistic architecture which is meaningful. So that is what I intend.
Great. Nilanja, we have less than 1 minute, so if you want to add within 1 minute.
I'll just add to what Professor Shah has said to the curriculum. I think right from the first semester onwards for the students, sustainable building practices should be taught. What is sustainable, how to design sustainably, and sustainable materials, sustainable technologies, and giving them live examples of where it has been used. And then making the students visit or at least study and form a critical appraisal, do a critical appraisal of such building. There are thousands of green buildings in India right now. Each student can be made to study some of them and then have a studio program. It should be very practical oriented. Ask them to design something which is totally sustainable. Give them a site which is ecologically fragile and which is remote, because other things can be taken care of. Because if they start from scratch with a green philosophy, because there has to be a change of mindset right from the beginning. Mostly the education of architecture has taught us to make buildings which are beautiful, which are iconic, which appeal to only one sense of the human being, that is the visual. But like Professor Shah and I strongly believe that architecture should appeal to all the five senses, not only the visual. It should be tactile, it should smell good, the taste should come in. You should be able to hear it as well. Hear the breeze, hear the sound of the water, hear the breeze, everything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I wish we had more time. We could just go on and on. And I'd like to thank both the panelists. And I'm sure that some of the questions that we were not able to address, but we'll make a note of it and we'll get back to the attendees and answer them through email. Really thank Premchand Memorial Trust for organizing and giving us this opportunity to get the panelists to address the important pertinent issues and talk about green architecture. And we'll get back to you again on another day to carry on our conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you all the attendees. Thank you panelists. Thank you technical hosts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vivekji. Thank you so much. If the students have any questions, they can follow me on Instagram, or I can put my Instagram handle and they can ask questions.
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Yes, it would be lovely if you share your Insta handle, Nilanja. That's a very cool medium for people too. And thank you, everyone. It was a fantastic session. I heard the whole thing. So thank you very much. It's lovely.
Thank you, Payal, for having us over. Thank you, Professor Shah. Always great to have you on the panel and get enlightened by your views. Thank you, Vivek, for organizing
Thank
this.
And I look forward to that session, Professor Shah, the one you mentioned. I would love to participate whenever you do a session on the buildings we spoke about. I would love to be part of it. Please send me an invite also.
Okay, see you guys. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Bye, Vivek ji. Thank you so much.
Thank you.